All right, gang. And we are back and live, back on the soapbox here with Austin Malleolo. Just wanted to hop back on here, do an episode, getting some really good feedback from you guys out there. Really appreciate it, you guys. I've been getting some emails and texts and stuff on Instagram of just people appreciating the content, and I can tell you it really means a lot to me to hear that stuff, because I always question if there's any value being added with these podcasts. So there's a lot of content out in the world there today, so I really appreciate that. So thank you. We're closing in on almost 30 episodes, and I think I had a few goals. One was to be consistent, and we're once a week, and I try to release every Thursday morning at 5 a.m. And then also try to keep it right around 20 minutes or under, just because a lot of the content I see out there and even consume is a little longer. So it might, for those of you that this fits your commute, or 20 minutes is a little more palatable depending on your day and your lifestyle. So been able to continue suit with that, and obviously my themes are circled around a lot of things that I do, from coaching to management to business to leadership. That's what I do day to day, but sometimes stray from there. So there really was never an intended topic. It was to get on a topic, whatever it might be, and then to go on a soapbox. And I had a few ideas for this one, and I had a few things bouncing around, but one thing, I settled on it right before I actually started recording. Is yesterday was my 13-year anniversary with my wife, and obviously 13 years ago was just a very attractive woman that I met in calculus class. And a lot of people came up to me and they were just saying congrats and really nice things. I put up a post that of almost 13 years ago, when I looked very different, so that always gets a lot of reaction. But it made me think a lot in the past 24 hours of kind of where we are today as in a relationship. So I wanted to kind of chat a little bit about relationships and some of my learnings and struggles and whatever it might be, because the older that I get, and not saying that I'm old, but the longer that I'm around and have friends and family members that are in relationships, get out of relationships, it's become very clear to me that a relationship is one of the, if not the hardest thing someone will endeavor upon in their life. And no one ever tells you that. People talk about, life being challenging or hard and work and struggles or this or that. But, now, looking 13 years, back, and now obviously the rest of my life forward, that a successful relationship is as challenging as it could ever be, because it's consistent work. There's two people that are consistently changing at different rates. I mean, I'm listening to a book right now called Range, and I think as I'm getting nearing towards the end of it, one of the most amazing concepts. It's so simple that no one stays the same, and thus a lot of people change jobs or change goals and change what they want and their passions, and that's okay. And sometimes that's vilified in this culture and society. In fact, but those that sometimes are the most successful in life have the most range, and because they've changed and they've diversified their interests and they've learned from different areas. And as a relationship, it's no different. And I think it's easy to overlook that. It's like, well, the person that I was with 13 years ago is clearly going to be different today, and then 13 years from now. And simply put, we have a child now, so things are different. Things change, and so, if there's one piece of advice that you can give to someone early on that they probably won't listen to, I always think about advice. Would I ever listen to it when I was 20 years old? Probably not, right? I mean, specifically when you're with someone in a relationship and you're blinded by, it's sort of this young love, if you will. It's very hard to move outside of that. But I do think it's important to understand a few things. That when you're with someone, you make a commitment when you're married, and prior to that you're learning, right? And I think that that's what it comes down to. And I think that I never looked at marriage as anything really more than, well, my feelings don't change, right? It's like I got married and like, for me nothing changed other than the fact that we were married, and the feelings and the emotions were always there, hence that was the next step. that commitment, whatever you want to call it, whether it's marriage, whatever it might be, I don't really care. I think what you're saying there, whatever title you want to put on it, you're saying that you're making a commitment to one person for the rest of your life. And I think that, so you do need to go through a period of time that you are learning about one another. And that's, I think that's really important. And I think it's easy to forget that prior to that, you're learning and you're figuring something out, and hopefully you're going through struggles. I think one of the blessings in disguise that I had in my relationship with Maren, my wife, is Maren, it really just was amazing and just, straight shot. But for me, I struggled a lot, got in a lot of trouble together. And as you'll hear more of my life story, when we were together, I mean, I got, kicked out of school. I had to go back home and all these things. And it didn't make the relationship any easier. It made it harder. We had to be long distance for years. And I had graduated later. She had a job. I was still in school. There's all these things. And in that, you learn, one, is this the right person? And it's not like in the moment, you're not like, oh, this is one of those moments where we're going to figure it out. It's just, well, do you stay with each other or do you not? And during that time, are you happy? Just because things are challenging or difficult doesn't mean you can't be happy in that time. And I think that's probably one of the things in retrospect that I never felt unhappy. It was always just, hey, this is, we're going to make this work because that's what we do. And it was never a question. And I think that that's something that was one of those things that as we pushed through, things started it was never like, oh, is this the right person for me for the rest of my life? It was like, well, it was the only person for me for the rest of my life. And I think when you have to have those feelings. And I do think in this society, it's vilified to have to question, to doubt, but you need to go through those processes at some point in a relationship, and, earlier than later. And then as you go through it, I think that there's probably a few lucky things in our relationship that, I found a passion, CrossFit, pretty early on in our relationship. And that really, it consumed me from a competitive perspective, from a career perspective, from a coaching perspective. It was all that I did. And the reason why I find that to be lucky, and because there's a character attribute in your partner, I think is you need to have it, is that they need to support, push, and believe in you more than you believe in yourself when it comes to that passion. And for me, it was competing at something brand new and making it my life. It was, trying, getting on CrossFit Seminar Staff and then traveling around the world. And what I realized is that in all of this, and obviously my pursuits, created, a lifestyle for me that was rigorous and still is to this day, where oftentimes people ask us, and oftentimes Maren, when I'm not around, is like, how do you do it with, Austin not around so much, or working so much, or training so much? And for me, I would often have those conversations with her. I just remember one time I was like, it was about training or traveling somewhere, and she's like, and I was like, well, what should I do? Do you want me to stay or go? And she was like, well, of course you go. That's what you do. And it was like, there's a few of those moments where I look back, I'm like, that's it. Like, this is someone in my life that is and I've referred to this before as my counterbalance. And because you look at my life and there is not balance. I'm not going to be preaching to you that you need to have a beautiful work-life balance and all this other stuff, because I personally don't believe in it. I believe that you need a counterbalance in your life to keep your head on straight, to help you push towards your goals, but also to keep you in line when you need to be in line. For lack of a better way to pull it, a counterbalance for me is the boss. It's who she is. And no doubt, it is also areas of struggle and where we have times of strife. But again, there's always two sides to this sword. That's just the way it rolls. But I really think that from a relationship perspective, you need someone that truly supports you, and to the point where it's almost selfless. And I find I'm very lucky for that. And I think that if you want to be a person of passion, a person of purpose, you need that. And communication. As we've gotten older together, and as I've gotten older, I think communication is something that it's never easy. Gosh, I communicate for a living with people, but it's very difficult to communicate with your partner when you're discussing very, very personal things, and you're dealing with yourself, but also other things that your partner's dealing with that you might not be aware of. But you need to communicate with one another and learn. And this is something that, and then communication needs to lead to action. This is something that I struggle with. And what I mean by that is you can sit down and have a conversation of where you're struggling. And it's not it might start off as a, he said, she said, I'm right, you're wrong type of deal. You upset me. But then when it boils down, you need to get to a root cause. Why were you upset? Why was there an argument? Why was there, a wavelength you weren't on? And then from there needs to be some level of reconciliation from an action perspective. Okay, got it. Well, in order to prevent this from continually happening, what behavior do I have to change? And what behavior do you have to change? And going through this process back and forth, and because oftentimes it's easy to take each other for granted, therefore not put those things into action. And think about it like, oftentimes when you're like you are more well behaved, you interact more professionally when you're in public with other people, and then when you're with the ones you care about, you let your guard down. So you take them for granted. You become a little selfish, and that's, I believe, a root cause of how a lot of relationships really fall apart. And that's something that I've learned and still struggle with it. When I'm saying I've learned, I'm just saying from 13 years of relationship. By no means am I a relationship guru. It's just from things that I've learned and focused on. And in 5 years from now, there's going to be a whole new focus and a whole new learning, and that's just the way it is. When we had Haley, obviously we learned a lot. The first year of having a kid is very challenging because you're taking care of another human being, and there's a whole new level of responsibility and stress, and then new communication and about not only each other but someone else you're taking care of, and there's a whole new level of emotion there. And I think that another piece is having your own progression, and learning from that. So for us, it was, we were together for a long time. We were engaged for a year and a half. Then we got a dog. We moved in together a long time ago. Then we bought a house. Like, we had a little progression, and because all of those things, and that progression could be anything for you, but you're adding complexity. With each other. You're adding responsibility, and therefore you're adding opportunities for failure. But with opportunities for failure becomes many opportunities for triumph and for success. But in order to do that, you must communicate. And so I think that notion of communication and action is really important. And, life can be a beautiful progression, just like we see in fitness, right? Where you don't just start out with, 30 unbroken muscle ups. You have to start out, on the ground with your muscle up transitions, banded pull-ups, and jumping ring dips. That's date one. You're learning. And, maybe you hate it, so you never come back to the CrossFit gym or whatever it might be, and you have setbacks along the way, you have injuries, but, you do have to keep pushing forward if you want to go towards that goal. And your goals change over time. I think it is one of those things where every relationship is different and how people interact is different, but here's things that I feel should be consistent, that you should have someone that cares about you almost more than you care about yourself at times. That's really important. Find that person. Communicate. And it's okay to be very different, but the commonality is each other. And I think that's another thing. And it's okay to be very different and to have different passions or viewpoints and whatever it might be, but what is common is your feelings towards each other. And I think that you don't need to fit a square peg in a round hole, but you can know that, all right, well, we're both shapes, and therefore that might be in our commonality is that, and looking back, it's one of those things where I even look at my dad, who he's got friends, and obviously they go through all different types of relationship struggles, and it's like this is a never-ending thing. But it was just something that was on the top of my mind recently, just because we obviously 13 years is a good amount of time, and recalibrating. Like, it's like, what do we have to focus on? It's like, you should have goals as a relationship. And it's easy to take each other for granted when you have a kid or when you have other things, and, making sure that if you have a goal for your fitness, if you have a goal for, your finances, you should have a goal for each other. And seeing other people around me, and tenure of relationship doesn't mean health of relationship. It's just time. And I see other healthy relationships, and you see similarities and commonalities. But I definitely think that when it boils down to it, it's this notion of communication and work. Vulnerability is probably the biggest thing. You need to be vulnerable in order to have these conversations. You really do. You need to have a level of humility, because you're going to be wrong. You're going to have to compromise. These are all things that are part of the deal, and because that leads to action. Humility, vulnerability, compromise, those things will lead to understanding and therefore action. I think that obviously and I want to hop on the soapbox because, people, I do think it's important. And I also think that, another topic I did want to touch on, later on is just this notion of people, really thinking that their opinions are facts, and people's that, whatever they feel or whatever their viewpoints are, if they are around someone that is different and with different views or opinions, then they really struggle, like they get mad at them or whatever it might be. And I think that it all boils down to some very similar things. And I think that, and it ties into a similar concept that you never want to be so consumed with yourself, consumed with what you believe or what you think is right, and then you start to turn blind to other things. I mean, that can lead to awful things like hatred and being just a mean person, but also just being someone that is inconsolable and just you can't reason with them. And that can happen in a relationship as well, as where like you just need to realize that how you feel is one thing, and that's important, but then your opinions, your thoughts, your viewpoints, what you think sometimes doesn't matter. No matter how educated or thought out, whatever it is, like sometimes you just need to put that aside and have a conversation, even if it's not exactly what you believe in, because nobody cares. Get over yourself, right? Like that's what it comes down to. And I think once you can do that, you can achieve some pretty unbelievable interactions with your significant others, other people. I just wanted to share that with you guys. So again, that was on top of mind. So just reflecting on 13 years, and obviously probably left out a lot of learnings, but it's on the top of my mind now. Just like anything, whatever's there, happening recently is some things you're going to think about, and that's okay. But I always say is find a counterbalance in your life, and someone that is strong-willed enough to tell you how it is and make it happen. But and I'm a fan of find someone better than you, play up, right? I've always been a fan, whether you're playing sports or whatever it is, you should be with people. You should be the worst one in the room, and you will get better. Same thing in a relationship, play up. That's the one tip, because you will be forced to be a better person if you are a good person. So that's what I have for you guys. Kept it under 20 minutes. Hopefully you find some value there. Shoot me some comments or questions or whatever. If you want to hear something on an episode or two, just let me know. But I appreciate it, guys. See you on the other side.